Rachel Morgan saw the name tag, Tanya, glanced at her dark skin, and smiled. To the wife of Kwon Ji-hoon, one of New York's most powerful Korean CEOs with whispered connections to organized crime, the Black American waitress was just another opportunity to prove she belonged in her husband's world. The exclusive French-Korean fusion restaurant in Brooklyn was their territory, where they entertained associates and displayed their power. Tonight, Rachel decided the waitress would be her evening's entertainment. She didn't know that Tanya Williams wasn't just any server. She had no idea that her attempt to humiliate Tanya would not only backfire spectacularly, but would trigger the unraveling of her husband's carefully constructed criminal empire. This is the story of how arrogance met its match. If you enjoy stories of unexpected justice, hit that like button and subscribe to see more powerful comebacks like this one. The air inside Le Jardin, Brooklyn's most prestigious fine dining establishment, smelled of truffle oil, aged wine, and extravagant wealth. For Tanya Williams, it mostly smelled like survival. The scent of seared foie gras and delicate French sauces mixed with the subtle designer perfumes of Manhattan's elite. The low amber lighting cast elegant shadows across the cream-colored walls and the imported Italian marble floors. Crystal chandeliers refracted light like scattered diamonds across tables draped in pristine white linen. Le Jardin wasn't just a restaurant. It was a status symbol, a place where billion-dollar deals were sealed and social hierarchies reinforced. Where tech moguls sat beside old money families, where celebrities hid behind velvet curtains, and where a single meal cost more than Tanya's monthly rent. Tanya moved between the tables with practiced grace, invisible until needed, the perfect server in a world that preferred not to acknowledge her existence beyond her function. Her Georgetown education hidden behind a pleasant smile. Her fluency in 6 languages reduced to, "May I take your order?" Her former life as a diplomatic translator and cultural attaché buried beneath the mask of polished deference. She balanced champagne flutes worth more than her weekly paycheck, her mind running constant calculations. $847 still needed for Grandma Jean's medication. $1,200 for her sister Keisha's textbooks. Rent due in 5 days. Every smile, every "yes, ma'am," every perfectly executed course was a brick in the wall protecting her family from financial collapse. At 29, she had mastered the art of being a shadow, present but unseen, attentive but unheard. That's how the ultra-wealthy preferred it. Then the atmosphere shifted. The maitre d' straightened his spine like a soldier at attention. Conversations dropped to reverent whispers. Heads turned toward the entrance with a mixture of fascination and fear. Kwon Ji-hoon entered first, 6 feet of controlled power in a tuxedo that probably cost more than a luxury car. Tattooed fingers visible at his cuffs, a detail that somehow made him more dangerous rather than less. His reputation preceded him, CEO of KJ Enterprises, Korean business elite, and the subject of whispered rumors about connections that went far beyond legitimate boardrooms. Behind him, draped in crimson silk that screamed new money desperately trying to look old, came Rachel Morgan. Former Instagram influencer. Current trophy wife. A woman who'd married into power and wore it like ill-fitting armor, always afraid someone would notice it didn't quite belong to her. The manager personally escorted them to table 7, the power table, the one with the best view and the most privacy, reserved for only the most important guests. And then he did something that made Tanya's stomach drop. He gestured directly at her. "Ms. Morgan specifically requested you," he murmured, his professional smile tight with warning. "Don't mess this up. They're extremely important clients." As Tanya approached their table, order pad in hand and professional mask firmly in place, Rachel's eyes locked onto her with the predatory gleam of someone who'd spotted easy prey. Kwon barely looked up from his phone, his tattooed fingers scrolling with practiced disinterest, but there was something deliberate about his indifference. He was watching without watching. Rachel's smile widened, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tanya didn't know it yet, but the next 5 minutes would cost her everything she'd been desperately holding on to. And give her back something far more valuable, her voice, her dignity, and the chance to use her extraordinary gifts the way they were meant to be used. The game was about to begin. But Rachel Morgan had made one fatal miscalculation. She thought she was the only player at the table. Kwon Ji-hoon didn't walk into rooms, he claimed them. Even in Le Jardin, where power was as common as champagne, his presence created ripples. The tech billionaire at table 3 paused mid-sentence. The Hollywood producer at table 5 suddenly found her wine glass fascinating. A venture capitalist who'd been laughing too loudly immediately lowered his voice. Tanya watched it happen from across the dining room, a phenomenon she'd witnessed before with certain guests. The way space seemed to contract around them. The way even wealthy people recognized when someone operated on a different level entirely. KJ Enterprises was the official story, a multinational conglomerate dealing in real estate, technology investments, and import-export. The unofficial story, the one whispered in certain circles, involved money laundering operations spanning 3 continents, strategic investments that looked suspiciously like protection rackets, and connections to Korean organized crime families that ran deeper than anyone could prove. Kwon had been investigated twice by federal authorities. Both times, witnesses had mysteriously changed their testimonies. He settled into table 7 like a king claiming his throne, his tailored tuxedo unable to fully disguise the edge of violence beneath the polish. Those tattooed fingers, visible just past his cuffs, weren't decorative. In certain Korean criminal organizations, they told a story. Tanya had learned to read that story during her 6 years in Seoul. Rachel Morgan slid into her seat with less grace, compensating with the kind of performance that came from deep insecurity. She adjusted her crimson dress 3 times, made sure her diamond earrings caught the light, and surveyed the room to see who was watching her. The former lifestyle influencer had built a following of 2 million people by showcasing a life of curated perfection. Then she'd landed Kwon, her ultimate achievement, her final proof that she'd made it. But Tanya could see what Rachel couldn't hide, the way her smile tightened when Kwon ignored her. The desperate energy of someone who'd climbed to a height that terrified her. Rachel had married power, but she didn't own it, and everyone in her world could smell the difference. Around the restaurant, reactions varied. The old money families looked vaguely disapproving but wouldn't dare voice it. The tech moguls watched Kwon with calculating interest, potential business, potential threat. 2 men at table 9, both Korean, both in expensive suits, sat straighter when Kwon entered. Associates, Tanya guessed. Or employees. Or something darker. She glided toward table 7, every muscle trained in the choreography of invisible service. Professional smile. Relaxed shoulders. Order pad ready. The mask she'd worn for months settling over her features like a second skin. Rachel's eyes tracked her approach like a predator watching prey enter the clearing. There was something calculating in that gaze, something cruel. Rachel's fingers drummed against the white linen tablecloth, manicured, restless, already planning something. Tanya had seen that look before. She knew exactly what it meant. The decision was already forming behind Rachel's eyes. Tonight, the waitress would learn her place. 4 years ago, Tanya Williams had walked through the U.S. Embassy in Seoul with diplomatic credentials and the kind of security clearance that opened doors most people didn't know existed. She'd been 25 and brilliant, a linguistic prodigy who'd absorbed Korean the way most people breathed air. Georgetown had been just the beginning. The State Department had recruited her straight out of graduate school, recognizing something rare, not just fluency, but cultural synthesis. She didn't just speak Korean, she understood it in 4 regional dialects, could shift between formal and informal registers with perfect precision, could catch the subtle markers that revealed everything from a speaker's hometown to their social class to their criminal affiliations. Her specialization had made her invaluable, Korean organized crime linguistics. She'd spent 6 years in Seoul, sitting in on classified briefings, interpreting wiretaps, translating testimony that helped dismantle trafficking networks and money laundering operations. She'd learned to recognize the coded language crime families used, the specific terminology that separated legitimate businessmen from those with blood on their balance sheets. She'd been good at it. Exceptional, even. Until the day Deputy Director Marcus Reynolds had asked her to mistranslate a key witness's testimony. Just a few words, he'd said, just enough ambiguity to protect a Korean official who happened to be strategically important to U.S. interests. Never mind that the official had helped facilitate the trafficking of women and girls. Never mind that justice was being traded for political convenience. Tanya had refused. She'd submitted the accurate translation. And within 3 months, she'd been quietly pushed out. No dramatic firing, just a door that closed and locked behind her. Blacklisted from government work. Her security clearance revoked. Her career destroyed for the crime of having a conscience. Now, she stood in Le Jardin carrying a tray instead of diplomatic credentials, her Georgetown degree and 6 years of expertise reduced to, "Good evening, may I take your order?" Present day meant Grandma Jean in Sunset Gardens nursing home, $4,800 a month for the memory care unit she needed as Alzheimer's slowly stole her away. It meant her younger sister Keisha at NYU, brilliant and determined, drowning in student loans that Tanya had promised to help cover. It meant their parents were gone, a car accident 3 years ago that had left Tanya responsible for everyone. The mathematics of survival ran constantly in her head: rent $2,200, utilities $180, Grandma's medication copay $847, Keisha's textbooks $1,200, groceries, MetroCard, the phone bill she was already 2 weeks late paying. Her server's salary plus tips barely covered it when everything went right. A single disruption, a slow week, an unexpected expense, a lost job, would collapse the entire fragile structure. She couldn't afford pride. Couldn't afford principle. Couldn't afford to be anything except invisible and agreeable and perfectly, desperately employed. So when Rachel Morgan looked at her with that calculating cruelty, Tanya simply smiled and asked what she could bring them this evening, her brilliant mind carefully hidden, her voice trained to pleasant deference. Because she'd learned the hard way, speaking truth to power cost everything. "Oh, honey, you're just precious," Rachel began, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that felt like poison. "I love your hair like that. So neat." Tanya's bun was standard server presentation, nothing remarkable. But Rachel delivered the compliment like she was bestowing a gift, her smile bright and utterly condescending. "Thank you, ma'am. May I start you with something to drink this evening?" "Oh, we're not quite ready yet." Rachel waved a dismissive hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I just have so many questions about the menu. You see, my husband and I have very sophisticated palates. We've eaten at the finest restaurants all over the world." She paused, letting that sink in. "Have you ever traveled? Outside of New York, I mean?" "I'm happy to answer any questions about tonight's menu," Tanya replied smoothly, her smile never faltering. Across the table, Quan scrolled through his phone with apparent disinterest, but Tanya caught the slight pause in his movements. He was listening. "I'm just wondering if you're familiar with international cuisine," Rachel continued, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "We're thinking of ordering something complex. Do you even know what galbi jim is? Or banchan? I'd hate to confuse you with dishes you've never heard of." Each question landed like a small slap. Each one designed to establish hierarchy, to remind Tanya of her place. Around them, nearby diners pretended not to listen while hanging on every word. "I'm familiar with Korean cuisine, ma'am. Le Jardin's chef trained in both Paris and Seoul, and our fusion menu." "Oh, you've read the website. How thorough." Rachel's laugh was crystalline and cruel. "But knowing about something and actually understanding it are very different, don't you think?" Tanya's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her order pad. $847 for Grandma's medication, she reminded herself. $1,200 for Keisha's textbooks. Rent in 5 days. "I'm here to ensure you have an excellent dining experience," she said, her voice perfectly pleasant. "Whatever you'd like to order, I'll make sure." "That's just it, sweetie. I'm not sure you can make sure." Rachel leaned back, frustration flickering across her face. The waitress wasn't reacting. Wasn't flustered. Wasn't giving her the satisfaction of visible discomfort. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. Then something shifted in her expression, a decision made, a new weapon selected. She glanced at Quan, who finally looked up from his phone, one eyebrow raised in mild interest. Rachel smiled, and this time it was genuine. She'd found her angle. "Annyeonghaseyo," she said suddenly, the Korean greeting precise and deliberate. The word hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. Kwon's lips curved into the faintest smirk. Now this was entertainment. Tanya's pen hovered over her order pad, her heart rate accelerating even as her expression remained perfectly neutral. Rachel watched her like a cat watching a cornered mouse, waiting for the confusion, the embarrassment, the inevitable fumbling. The game had officially begun. Rachel didn't wait for a response. She launched into rapid Korean, her voice rising with performative confidence. The words flowed in a torrent, ordering an elaborate traditional meal with multiple courses, specific preparations, demanding certain side dishes be prepared particular ways. Her pronunciation was decent, clearly the result of dedicated study, but Tanya's trained ear immediately caught the structural problems, the awkward grammar constructions, the slightly wrong contextual usage. Rachel continued, undeterred and growing louder. She was mixing formal and informal speech patterns incorrectly, throwing in vocabulary that didn't quite fit the situations she was describing. The conjugations were off. The honorifics misapplied. It was the Korean of someone who'd memorized phrases without fully understanding the intricate social mechanics beneath them. Conversations at nearby tables had stopped entirely now. The venture capitalist at table 5 watched with uncomfortable fascination. The old money couple at table 2 exchanged glances, disapproving, but too well-bred to intervene. The two Korean businessmen at table 9 had gone very still, their expressions carefully neutral, perhaps recognizing the linguistic performance for what it was. Rachel was clearly performing now, her voice carrying across the elegant dining room, each phrase delivered with exaggerated precision. Then came the insults, woven into her ordering, casual slang that essentially called Tanya clueless, uneducated, ignorant. The words were clumsy in construction, but the intention was unmistakable. She continued the performance, throwing out names of elaborate dishes, specific cooking techniques, architectural food presentations, creating an avalanche of Korean vocabulary clearly designed to overwhelm and humiliate. To the non-Korean speakers in the restaurant, it sounded impressively complex and incomprehensibly foreign. But someone truly fluent would recognize it as performed knowledge rather than genuine mastery. Rachel's finale came in the form of a question, dripping with mock concern. Did Tanya understand? Could she possibly comprehend what had just been said? The subtext was crystalline. Of course you don't understand. How could someone like you possibly understand? Tanya's knuckles had gone white against her order pad. Her pen pressed into the paper hard enough to leave an impression through multiple pages. Every muscle in her body had gone rigid, years of expertise and training colliding violently with months of enforced silence and suppressed identity. She could see Grandma Jean's face asking about her day. Could hear Keisha's voice, "You're keeping everything together, sis." Kwon had finally set down his phone entirely, leaning back in his chair with undisguised amusement. His smirk had widened into something almost gleeful. This was precisely the kind of casual cruelty that entertained him, his wife wielding her acquired cultural knowledge like a weapon against someone who appeared powerless to respond. Around them, the restaurant held its collective breath. Some diners looked amused. Others visibly uncomfortable. None intervened. Rachel's eyes glittered with satisfaction, already tasting victory, certain of the humiliation she'd inflicted. She had absolutely no idea she'd just made the worst miscalculation of her life. 30 seconds. That's how long Tanya had to decide who she was going to be. The order pad trembled slightly in her hands. Around her, the restaurant waited, some faces eager for her humiliation, others uncomfortable but silent, all of them watching. Grandma Jean's voice echoed in her memory, soft and warm despite the confusion that increasingly clouded her eyes. Did you have a good day, baby? Did they treat you right? Every evening, the same question. Every evening, Tanya lied and said yes, because what good would the truth do? Grandma Jean had worked 3 jobs to help raise her and Keisha after their mother died the first time. Now it was Tanya's turn. $4,800 a month for the memory care unit. Non-negotiable. Essential. Flash to Keisha's face 2 years ago, acceptance letter clutched in her hands, tears streaming. I got in, Tanya. I actually got in. NYU. Full ride denied. Loans approved. Dreams deferred without someone to help carry the weight. Keisha was brilliant, chemical engineering, 3.9 GPA, everything their parents had hoped for. $1,200 for textbooks this semester. More next semester. Tuition payments stretched across years. The mathematics of survival scrolled through Tanya's mind with brutal clarity: rent, utilities, medication copays, student loans, groceries, phone bill already 2 weeks overdue. One lost job meant everything collapsed. Grandma Jean in a state facility. Keisha dropping out. The fragile architecture of their lives reduced to rubble. Rachel's expression was pure triumph now, her smile wide and satisfied, already mentally composing the story she'd tell at brunch tomorrow about the waitress who couldn't even understand a simple order. But beneath the financial calculations, something else stirred in Tanya's chest. A memory 4 years old, Deputy Director Reynolds leaning across his desk, asking her to change just a few words, to mistranslate just enough to protect a man who'd facilitated trafficking. The weight of her security badge in her hand as she surrendered it. The sound of a door closing on her career, her identity, her voice. She'd been silenced once for having principles. She'd accepted it, survived it, rebuilt from it. But this, standing here while a woman performed her cruelty for entertainment, using Tanya's race and assumed ignorance as the punchline, this was different. This wasn't about policy or politics or strategic interests. This was about whether Tanya Williams still existed beneath the server's uniform. Whether 6 years of expertise and a Georgetown education and fluency in 6 languages meant anything at all, or if she'd erased herself so completely that nothing remained worth protecting. Some humiliations were practical. Strategic. Survivable. Some were a surrender of the soul itself. The moment crystallized with perfect clarity. Tanya took a slow breath, and looked up from her order pad. Her eyes met Rachel's directly for the first time. And she began to speak. The Korean that came from Tanya's mouth was flawless. Not hesitant. Not fumbling. Not the broken phrases of someone who'd learned basic greetings from a language app. This was the fluid, effortless Korean of someone who'd lived in Seoul, who'd sat in government briefings, who'd spent 6 years interpreting the subtle shadings of meaning that separated diplomatic language from criminal code. She began by gracefully confirming Rachel's order, but in doing so, corrected every grammatical error with such subtle precision that anyone fluent would catch it immediately. The wrong verb conjugation, fixed. The misapplied honorific, adjusted. The formal patterns Rachel had mangled, reconstructed with perfect accuracy. Tanya's tone remained respectful, professional, but the subtext was devastating. I speak your weapon better than you do. She listed each dish Rachel had attempted to order, using the proper contextual frameworks, the correct social registers, demonstrating a command of the language that made Rachel's performance look like exactly what it was: studied, superficial, purchased rather than earned. Then Tanya turned to Kwan. The shift was immediate and deliberate. She switched to the formal Seoul business dialect, the language of corporate boardrooms and high-level negotiations. The register that serious people use for serious conversations. Sir, if I may suggest, she said in flawless Korean, given that you're from Busan, you might enjoy something not on our menu this evening. She mentioned a specific dish, a traditional Busan specialty that wouldn't be known to casual food enthusiasts. Only someone familiar with his hometown's culinary culture would know it. Then came the subtle devastation. She used terminology that, to the untrained ear, sounded like food service vocabulary. But Kwan would recognize the double meanings immediately, phrases that had other applications in the world of import-export businesses, the kind with shipping containers that held more than their manifests claimed. References to special arrangements and trusted suppliers that could mean legitimate business or something far darker. She was telling him, in the most elegant possible way, I know exactly who you are. The restaurant had gone absolutely silent. Every conversation suspended. Every fork motionless. The 2 Korean businessmen at table 9 sat frozen, their faces showing clear shock at what they were witnessing. Rachel's expression transformed in stages, first incomprehension, then recognition, then pure fury. Her face flushed crimson, matching her dress. Her hands clenched on the white tablecloth hard enough to wrinkle the pristine linen. But it was Kwan's reaction that changed the air pressure in the room. His smirk had vanished. For 3 full seconds, he stared at Tanya with genuine surprise, the look of a predator discovering the rabbit had teeth. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Something calculating and dangerous. His expression settled into something complex, respect for the skill she'd demonstrated, mixed with the cold assessment of someone who just identified a potential threat. He leaned back slowly, his tattooed fingers drumming once against the table. When he spoke, it was in English, his voice quiet and controlled. Where exactly did you learn to speak like that? It wasn't a casual question. It was an interrogation. The temperature in Le Jardin had dropped 10 degrees, and everyone could feel it. Rachel's voice shattered the silence like breaking glass. This is unacceptable. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. I will not be disrespected by the help. This is completely inappropriate. Her fury radiated across the dining room, humiliation transmuted into rage, embarrassment weaponized into indignation. Several diners looked away, uncomfortable witnesses to the spectacle. The manager materialized instantly, his face pale with panic. Gerald Morrison had worked at Le Jardin for 15 years and knew exactly what VIP clients like the Kwans meant to the restaurant's reputation and bottom line. His eyes darted between Rachel's furious face and Tanya's calm one, doing rapid calculations that didn't favor the waitress. Mrs. Kwan, I am so sorry, please let me. She was deliberately condescending, Rachel hissed, though everyone in earshot knew the accusation was absurd. Speaking to us like that, showing off, making us uncomfortable. Kwan said nothing. He simply stood, buttoning his tuxedo jacket with deliberate precision. But his eyes stayed locked on Tanya, and they promised consequences. Not the hot anger of his wife, but something colder. More patient. More dangerous. Ms. Williams. Gerald's hand closed around her elbow, his grip firm. Step into the back. Now. Tanya moved without resistance, already knowing how this would end. She'd known the moment she'd opened her mouth. Some part of her had known and spoken anyway. The manager's office was small and utilitarian, a stark contrast to the elegant dining room. Gerald didn't sit. Didn't waste time with preamble. You're terminated. Effective immediately. His voice was tight with barely suppressed panic. You embarrassed extremely valued guests. I can't have staff who create incidents with. I understand, Tanya said quietly. Clear out your locker. I'll have your final paycheck ready in 20 minutes. She nodded, feeling strangely detached, as if watching this happen to someone else. When she emerged to collect her things, Kwan and Rachel were leaving, his hand proprietarily on the small of her back. Rachel's fury still radiated from her rigid posture, but she wouldn't look in Tanya's direction. Kwan, however, paused. He crossed the space between them with measured steps, reached into his inner jacket pocket, and extended a business card. His expression was unreadable. You're wasted here, he said quietly, his English precise and unaccented. Call me if you want real work. The card was heavy stock, embossed. KJ Enterprises. A phone number. The offer felt less like an opportunity and more like a threat wrapped in professional courtesy. Or perhaps a test. Tanya took the card because refusing would have been more dangerous than accepting. Then they were gone, and she was standing in the service corridor holding her final paycheck and a business card from a man whose criminal empire she'd once helped investigate. Rent was due in 5 days. Grandma Jean's medication in 8. She had no job, no prospects, and no safety net. But as Tanya walked out into the cool Brooklyn night, her server's apron left behind, something unexpected settled in her chest. She felt lighter. Freer. For the first time in 4 years, she'd used her voice. And somehow, despite everything, that mattered. Tanya had made it half a block when a voice called out behind her. Ms. Williams. A moment, please. She turned to find a woman in her mid-40s approaching, sleek charcoal suit, silver threading through her dark hair, the kind of controlled presence that suggested authority. Tanya had noticed her earlier, dining alone at table 12 near the corner, seemingly absorbed in her meal and her phone. Apparently, she'd been paying closer attention than she'd appeared. That was impressive back there, the woman said, stopping a professional distance away. The Seoul business dialect, specifically. You also caught his Busan hometown markers and adjusted your register accordingly. That's not something you pick up from Duolingo. Where did you learn Korean like that? Tanya's exhaustion warred with caution. Who's asking? The woman reached into her jacket and produced credentials. FBI. Transnational Crime Unit. Director Sarah Chen. I followed the entire exchange, Sarah continued, pocketing her badge. Understood every word. Including the part where you subtly referenced import-export terminology that has very specific meanings in certain criminal contexts. She tilted her head slightly. So I'll ask again, where did you learn that? Something in Sarah's directness cut through Tanya's defenses. Maybe it was the night's events. Maybe it was having nothing left to lose. Maybe it was simply exhaustion. The full story came out. Georgetown. The State Department. 6 years in Seoul specializing in organized crime linguistics. The incident with Deputy Director Reynolds. The blacklisting. The 4 years of survival work that had led her to a server's uniform at Le Jardin. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more focused with each detail. We've been building a case against KJ Enterprises for 2 years, she said when Tanya finished. Kwon Ji-hoon runs a sophisticated operation, money laundering, trafficking, strategic corruption. But he's careful. Insulated. Everything runs through coded language, cultural references, business terminology that means something completely different to the initiated. She paused, letting that sink in. We have recordings. Wiretaps. Documentation. What we don't have is someone who can interpret not just the words, but the cultural subtext. The register shifts that indicate who's really in charge. The hometown references that reveal network connections. We need someone who understands the language and the criminal culture behind it. Tanya's heart had started beating faster. I'm offering you a consultant position, Sarah continued. Contract work initially, with the potential for full federal employment if this goes where I think it will. Help us decode Kwon's operation. Translate the evidence we've gathered. Testify as an expert witness when this goes to trial. She held Tanya's gaze steadily. Use that brilliant mind the way it was meant to be used. Help us bring down Kwon Ji-hoon and everyone in his network. Take back what was stolen from you 4 years ago. The Brooklyn street hummed with evening traffic. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Tanya's final paycheck sat in her bag alongside Kwon's business card. 2 different futures, 2 radically different paths. For the first time in 4 years, Tanya Williams looked at her own power and didn't flinch away from it. Yes, she said. When do I start? 3 months later, Tanya Williams walked through the security checkpoint at the federal courthouse in Brooklyn wearing a tailored charcoal suit and newly restored credentials that identified her as lead linguistic expert and cultural consultant for the FBI's Transnational Crime Unit. The marble halls echoed with purpose. Attorneys moved with focused intensity. U.S. Marshals stood at strategic positions. This was federal justice in motion, and for the first time in 4 years, Tanya was part of it again. Courtroom 7B was packed. Media in the back rows. Federal prosecutors at their table, organized and confident. And at the defense table, flanked by 3 expensive attorneys, sat Kwon Ji-hoon. His hands were cuffed. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the defendant's chair or the U.S. Marshal position nearby. The man who'd walked into Le Jardin like he owned the world now sat in federal custody, his empire systematically dismantled over 3 months of investigation. In the gallery, Rachel Morgan sat rigid in designer clothes that now looked like a costume rather than armor. Her Instagram had gone silent. Her influencer friends had quietly unfollowed. She stared straight ahead, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Tanya took her position at the interpreter's station, her equipment tested and ready. For 2 days, she translated every wiretapped conversation, every recorded meeting. Her expertise transformed what had seemed like legitimate business discussions into clear criminal conspiracy. She identified the code words, shipping arrangements, that meant human trafficking routes, investment opportunities, that laundered drug money, cultural consultants, who were actually enforcers. Her analysis of register shifts revealed the hierarchy, who deferred to whom, which hometown references indicated gang affiliations, how Kwan's careful language maintained plausible deniability while still controlling his network. The evidence was devastating. Money laundering across 3 continents. Human trafficking networks. Strategic extortion of legitimate Korean businesses. Kwan's carefully constructed empire exposed in all its brutality. During the afternoon break on day 2, Kwan caught Tanya's eye across the courtroom. His expression was complex, anger, certainly, but also something like regret. "I should have hired you that night," he said quietly in English as she passed. Tanya stopped, turned, and responded in flawless Korean, her voice calm and clear. "I was never for sale." His attorney stiffened. The U.S. Marshal moved slightly closer. But Kwan just nodded slowly, acknowledging a truth he'd understood too late. When court adjourned for the day, the prosecution's case was airtight. Kwan's conviction was virtually certain. His organization was dismantled. Dozens of associates already in custody or fleeing jurisdiction. Tanya descended the courthouse steps into the cool Brooklyn evening. She pulled out her phone and called Grandma Jean's facility, waiting for the nurse to hold the phone to her grandmother's ear. "Hi, Grandma. It's Tanya." Her voice was warm, genuine. "I got the job. The real one. The one I was meant for." Grandma Jean's response was confused but happy, memory failing but love constant. Tanya ended the call and stood for a moment on the courthouse steps, looking up at the Brooklyn sky as evening light painted it gold and purple. She was no longer invisible. No longer silenced. No longer diminished. She was exactly who she'd always been, brilliant, powerful, and finally, completely free. If watching Tanya go from humiliated waitress to the woman who destroyed Kwan's empire gave you chills, you need to subscribe right now. Because next week, I'm bringing you another story of perfect revenge, and if you're not subscribed, you'll miss it. Here's the deal, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I drop stories like this every single week. People who thought they could humiliate someone because of their race, their job, or their appearance, only to discover they picked the wrong person. Do 3 things right now. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Comment justice if you loved watching Tanya win. This channel is for people who are tired of bullies winning. If that's you, subscribe now and join thousands who celebrate when arrogance meets its match. Thanks for watching. See you in our next episode.